We must be pure of thought, word, and deed. I swear she's looking at me when she says that. I'm sitting there. Yes, sister, pure of thought, word, and deed. And then my mind would start imagining what she looked like naked. And inside me, I would cringe. I would go, oh, that sin's not even in the books. Oh my God. You can't go in that little box with that priest and tell him that. He'll come out of that box after you. You can't tell him that. You can't tell anybody that. It's just one more stone in the wall that you secretly know you're different. Right? And so, how am I ever going to be good enough for God? I can't think right. I'm not, on a bad spiritual hair day, my mind is weird. Now, most of the time contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. My thinking ain't that bad. I don't live in it that much. That's the good news. But on a bad spiritual hair day, I am capable of thinking pretty bizarre thoughts. Just like little things. Do you ever have someone just talking to you tediously and you're just tired of them talking? Just all of a sudden the thought goes through your mind, I'd like to stick a pencil in your eye. Now you don't do it, but did you ever just have, where's that thought come from? It's just kind of, it's like a drive-by thought. And it goes. I could be driving across town on a bad day. I got two movies that run in my head. One's sex and the other's violence. I'm driving along going, I'll kill him. I'll do her. I'll kill him. Right? And I ain't even doing nothing. I'm just driving across town. So, when I get to Alcoholics Anonymous and you guys start talking about God, there is a hopelessness in me. It's like, God, no. Not God. I can't do this. I can't do this. And I'm afraid. I wanted to be an atheist, but I can't be an atheist. Alcoholics have a hard time being atheists because if you ever met a real atheist, you have to be very religious about atheism. I mean, I can't get enough angst about atheism to be a good atheist. Well, I'm just scared of God. I'm afraid of being judged. I'm afraid of being put down. I'm afraid of being not enough. And one of the great things in Alcoholics Anonymous is that we don't really have to come to believe anything here. All we have to do is take some actions. And the results of the actions facilitate the coming to believe. And it's really an amazing experience, and it's open to all of us. One of the things that it talks about in the book it's such a simple little deal here on page 46. Right square in the middle of the page, it talks about just two things, and these two things anybody could make an attempt at these. They're not rocket science. The first thing it says in the third line in the middle paragraph, it says, we found as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice. What does that mean? That means all your preconceived notions and your judgments and your opinions. Can you get, based on the destruction in your life and everything you've been wrong about, can you get humble enough to say to yourself, maybe I don't know? Maybe I don't know. And open yourself up like a child who knows nothing. Can you get that open? Or can you at least get in the zip code of being that open? Can you constantly remind yourself, as it says in the 11th step, that not only we're not running the show, but I don't know. I mean, for God's sakes, if our track record speaks anything to us, it should tell us that we don't know, even though we have an ego that thinks it knows everything. One of the great turning points in my early sobriety, I'm not out of treatment very long, and I go to a meeting, And after the meeting, a guy named Joe comes up to me. And Joe, I'll never forget this. Joe said to me, he said, "Kid, you need to take step 3. And I looked at Joe. I said, "Joe, the truth is I can't take step 3. And he said, "Why not?" I said, "Well, I don't really believe in God, Joe. I mean, I don't know that for sure that there's not anymore. I used to think there for sure wasn't, but I just don't know. I don't have an experience with any of that." He said, "You don't have to believe in God to take step 3. I said, "Joe, look on the wall. It said, first of all, step 2, came to believe. Don't have that. Step 3, made a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understood Him. I don't have that. I don't have any of that, Joe." Joe said to me again, as if he didn't hear what I just told him. He said, "You don't have to believe in God to take step 3. And I'm looking at him like, well, confused, I suppose. And he said, "Listen, kid, if you'll turn your will and your life over to this chair," and he points to a chair in the Alano Club. He says, "I guarantee you an instant miracle." I thought, what the hell? All right, Joe, I turned my will and my life over to the chair. And he gets a big smile. I said, "Oh, the miracle is your life's no longer in the hands of an idiot." I didn't even get mad. I just thought, yeah, that'd be right. Yeah. See, I knew I didn't know. I knew I had this, it felt like anxiety, and it was. And most of my fears and inadequacies have simply been good judgment on my part. And the good judgment was, I don't think I can trust my thinking anymore. Big doings. For an egomaniac such as myself to get to a point where I'm starting to believe I can't trust my own thinking, which sounds silly in the light of my self-destructive track record. I mean, for God's sakes, anyone watching me and maybe watching you, could they come to any conclusion that whoever's making decisions for Bob must be out to kill Bob? But yet I resist the truth that I can't even trust my own thinking. I think this is the essence of the second half of step 1. I can't manage my own life. To know that you don't know. To know that I don't know. So if I can just become humble enough, and I think humility is a byproduct of facing the truth. My favorite definition of humility from Bill Wilson was an honest recognition of who and what we are, coupled by a sincere desire to find and do God's will. I think humility is just the truth. The funny thing about the word humility, it comes from a Latin word, humus, meaning earth, like in humus. It's the same root word as the root word of humiliation, or the word human, or the word humor. People that are humble are very humorous. Very humorous. All the people in AA that I know I think are basically humble. They're not perfect, and they struggle with egos and all kinds of stuff like that. But they laugh at themselves a lot. They laugh at themselves a lot. And they're very human. They're not bigger than, they're not less than. They're you can have a conversation with them, and you're not talking up to them, and you're not talking, they're part of the herd. They're human. So if I can just become human and become humble enough to lay aside everything I think I know. And then the second thing it says, and this is a beautiful thing, it says, and express. Now that's a verb. That's action. When you're going to express something, you're going to do something. You're going to take some action. And express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves. And if you can do those two things, the book promises. It says we'll commence to get results even though it was impossible for any of us, so stop trying. It was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power which is God. I know why you're trying to figure God out. Same reason you try to figure your boss out. So you can get a little leverage. You know what I'm saying? I understand. I spent my first several years in sobriety trying to figure out God's will. Because I knew I'd get a bigger piece of the pie if I could figure out God's will. You know, it's a little manipulative inside. If I can understand God, maybe I can maneuver him to my will a little bit, get him to come to his senses a little bit about certain things. So, if I can become humble enough to know I don't know, and then to start to express a willingness. Now, what does that look like? That doesn't say express a belief. It's an express a willingness to believe. What does that look like? That means it's really okay that you don't believe. Matter of fact, we're not saying that you have to believe. Matter of fact, it's probably good you don't. But are you willing to show up in life like someone would show up that was willing to possibly consider maybe, there could be, probably not, that there might be God? Are you willing to show up like that and see what happens? Well, one of the first things they told me to do, they knew I didn't believe in God, so they didn't say I needed to use the word God, because I had a little bit of resistance to that word. They told me to physically get down on my knees every morning and every night. And in the morning I was supposed to ask whatever was running the universe for help. And know as I'm asking that I needed that help. And I did know I needed the help. And then to get down on my knees at night and thank whatever that was. I didn't have to use the word God. I just said whatever's running the universe. I thought I could do that. My first concept that I was willing to entertain about God was from the movie Star Wars. I resisted. I had so much prejudice from my childhood, but I was open enough to consider the possibility that there might be something. And so I started turning my consciousness towards this thing that the truth is I don't really believe in. But I believed in my own hopelessness, and I believed I needed help, and I believed that I needed to do something that these people in AA were doing, so I'm in. I'm in AA. Want me to do something seems silly to me. I remember telling this guy, I said, I'll tell you, I get down on my knees, I'm doing what you say, but I don't believe in God yet, and I feel like a hypocrite. And he said to me, you've been a hypocrite all your life. What's the difference? Just do it. And he was right. I'd been a hypocrite all my life. I promise you anything, do what I want to do. I'm that guy. I'm a hypocrite. So I started doing this. And they would say things to me when you get scared or you're uptight. Pause. And turn and inside yourself, ask this power for help. And I got to tell you something. From the moment I started to take these actions, little creepy, weird coincidences started happening. Little crazy things. And they're all in my favor, which is odd for me because I have not been a good luck magnet. And it's all this stuff that's facilitating my growth, facilitating my life. There were times where it was so spooky, where just about the moment the roof's going to fall in, something would happen. I remember one time I'm going to have the electric turned off. I don't have the money to pay the electric bill. I don't have it, and I don't know. And then I know once it's turned off, they ask you for a big deposit to get it turned on again. I don't have that, and I'm going to be burning candles, I guess. I just felt so hopeless. I can't even pay the electric. And I don't even know if I'm going to be, I got just enough for the rent, but I can't pay the electric. And someone paid my electric bill for me. And evidently it was someone who owed an amends to the universe that they couldn't make directly, and their sponsor told them to go, why don't you find somebody in AA that needs help and go do that. And somebody evidently, to this day I don't know who it was. But I'll tell you, I've done a couple of those for other people, things like that. And the question is, who's the choreographer? Who had that guy think of me at the moment I needed it? And why the hell did he wait till the last minute? What's that about? Why does God I think God watches those movies where the cavalry comes at the last moment. He watches a lot of those, and then that's his modus operandi. I asked somebody one time, why does God wait till the last minute? And he said, because you didn't need his help until the last minute. Oh, I don't like that answer. I'd like to have the security and peace of mind of having the help up front. I had so much stuff like that. I remember one time I went to work and I got into work and my boss was there and he asked me about something and I don't know. He slammed me, disrespected me too, man. And I'll tell you, I'm sober by this time long enough to have enough self-esteem to be dangerous. And he cut into me and then he left. And I tell you, I'm just chewing on that. I would have liked to have hit him, but he was a boxing commissioner, an ex-Golden Gloves champion, and I'm not going to hit Art. I'm angry but not stupid. But I'm going to quit. You can't talk to me like that. It's a bad place. You don't know it's a bad place. It feels like a good place. But it's a bad place when your rights return. It's a bad place. It's a bad place. You think it's a good place, but it's not a good place. If they were ever to put a plaque over the gates of hell, it should say, "It's the principle of the thing." Oh. You ever hear me say that? Or another one, "I'm not a doormat. I'm about to destroy myself." So I'm going to quit my job, but I can't quit because he's not there. He's not going to be back till the afternoon. And I just can't quit because I got to say a few things to him before I quit to make him realize how wrong he had been and give him a chance to be properly ashamed of himself, I suppose. But I'm all morning, I'm chewing on this. I'm having conversations in my head with him over and over and over again. And the anxiety of that stuff ain't bad if you're drinking vodka. But man, sober, that churning like a rotisserie, it wears on guys like me. And about lunchtime comes, and I usually, every day I'd go down to this lunch counter, and I'd get a sandwich and sit down there and talk to a couple of the guys and gals that work there. And this day, the thought came to me that I better go to that noon meeting. And so I took my lunch hour and I rushed out to my car and I ran across town and came to this noon meeting, a meeting I don't go to very regularly, once in a while on my day off. And the meeting's already started. And you know how I'm one of those kind of people, I just don't walk into a room and I'm in the meeting. Mentally, it takes me a minute or two. I got to sit down and then I start to be able to hear. And just about the time I'm settled into my seat, a stranger that I don't know starts telling a story. And he starts talking about how his boss had asked him to do something and he didn't do it. And when his boss jumped him about not doing it, he gave his boss a bunch of BS excuses and he wanted to quit his job, and instead he went and he called his sponsor, and his sponsor said, "Quit your job, you were wrong. You didn't do what your boss said. You need to go make amends to your boss." And this is exactly the scenario that I just walked through. My boss the night before had asked me to do something before I left work, and selfishly I didn't want to do it because I was in a hurry to meet some guys before the meeting and I wanted to get out of there, and I didn't do it. And when I came in and work and he put me on the spot, I got defensive with him, and instead of saying I was wrong and doing it, I gave him a bunch of excuses which just aggravated him more. Because all he wanted me to do is say I was wrong and do it. But I couldn't do that because I couldn't admit that I was wrong. I'm so egocentric. And I'm sitting there in that meeting and I thought, oh my God, I don't need to quit my job. I need to make amends to my boss. I hate making amends. I think amends is the nuclear deterrent of the spirit. There's a whole bunch of crap in my life I try not to do just because I know what's coming on the back end. Because there's a lot of times, I bet you everybody in this room, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Everybody in this room. There's times where people they just need to be straightened out, don't they? I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, they're begging for it, for God's sake. Gotta keep my mouth shut. Keep my mouth shut. Because I know I'm going to have to go back and make amends to them. And so I went back to my boss and I went back to work and I did the project he wanted me to do, and I did a really good job. I did it really well. And he came back from his appointments and came in, and I pulled him aside and I told him, I was very nervous inside. I said, I want you to know I'm really sorry. When you asked me to do that last night, I was so much in a hurry to do something I wanted to do, I didn't do it. And then I got to work this morning with the intention of doing it first thing. It got sidetracked into something else. And when you confronted me about it, instead of being a man and standing up and saying I was sorry and getting it done, I gave you a bunch of excuses and you weren't entitled to that. And I was wrong and I won't do that again. And he put his arm around me and he said, hey kid, we all make mistakes. And then he told me a story. It was like AA. He told me a story about something he did when he first got into the business, how he screwed up. And this is the job that I want to quit. Worst job on the planet. And all of a sudden it's one of the nicest places to work. Oh my God. The question is, who's the choreographer? Who's behind the curtain? Who's behind the veil? Who's behind the fabric of the universe, massaging all these things in place to facilitate Bob not destroying Bob? Evidently behind the curtain there's some kind of man, that whoever the wizard is on the other side of the curtain evidently really likes me and cares about me, because it's all in my favor. And I started to come to believe in God the only way a guy like me can. I had to have an experience. But like a lot of us, I'm a God-resistant person by nature when I come here. And that's true of even religious people. And I'm God-resistant for a couple reasons that I don't even want to admit to myself. One is I'm afraid of God. And two, I think He's got my job. No, I mean, hey, if somebody's going to be God, hey. Right. I always sort of resented God for having my job. You know what I mean? If anybody's going to be king, it should be Bob. We should all be very grateful that I am not God. And so I started to believe in the only way a guy like me can, I suppose. And I'm going back to London in August. I go over there about every year. I sponsor some guys over there. First time I ever went over there years ago, I had a remarkable experience over there. If you go down to Westminster, now Westminster is the old historic district of London. That's where Buckingham Palace is. That's where it's on the edge of Trafalgar Square. It's where Hyde Park is, the Parliament, the Abbey. It's all the cool, really, pretty most of the cool stuff. The one museums there, and it's an older, more historical part of London. So consequently, the streets are lit by gas rather than electric streetlights. Now, not so much. The last time I was over there, I noticed that they've changed out a lot of this. But a few years ago, it was very common to walk the streets of Westminster, and as you walk by a light pole for the street lights at night, you could see a little box on the side of the pole. And the boxes were welded shut and painted over. And these are older poles, and what they come from the days when, before they had the computerized systems that turned the gas on all at the same time, and the electric light, the electric lighters that lit the flames. And back in those days, before they had that, there was men whose job was to walk up and down the streets of London at twilight, and they had a little key, and that box that was welded shut had once been like a little box, a door. And they'd open that little box, and they'd stick the key in, and they'd turn the gas on, and they'd reached up with this long pole with a flame on the end, and they'd light the street light. And come sundown, you could climb up to the top of the highest building in London and look out over the city, and no matter how hard you looked, you couldn't see the guy lighting the street lights. But you could see where he'd been by the lights. And I could sit in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous at 2 years sober, and I couldn't see where God was, but I could see where he'd been. and by the evidence in my life and seeing God in my life, and especially in the lives of the guys I was trying to sponsor and help. And I'll tell you something, if you don't sponsor anybody, you're really missing something here. It's a ringside seat to watch the hand of God. I can't tell you how many, I just had this experience again. I've had it so many times with sponsees and grand sponsees where their sponsor will call me up and they'll say, man, I don't know what to do. This guy's going to be thrown out in the streets, and I could loan him the money, but then I don't be sponsor. I think that's a bad thing. I'm afraid to do that. Afraid to do it because in the book it says we don't put our relationship on the service plane, and I don't know what to do. And I said, just don't do anything. And how often, out of nowhere, the problem becomes solved. And guys learn to trust, they learn to believe and trust in God by what the universe does in their absence. And when I say in their absence, it's because they've given up. There's nothing they can do. There's nothing they can do. And we get to see the hand of God. He works in our lives, but it's hard to see God in our individual lives. And it's not that God doesn't work in our lives, but He's slow. I mean, well, He's old. He's very old. And He's slow. He is. He's slow. He's never in a hurry. He doesn't have a Timex. Doesn't have a sense of urgency like we do. It's just, He unfolds things slowly. Trying to watch the hand of God in your life, trying to stand in front of a mirror and watch your hair grow. It doesn't mean it's not growing. It's just such a slow. But in the guys you sponsor, oh my God. You see the guy who's new, who can't even hold a cup of coffee. He's shaking so bad. And then a couple months later, he's given a talk. And he's almost English. And then six months later, he's starting to make sense. A year later, you're going to a meeting and he's got 3 sponsees, which makes you want to pray for him. He's got 3 sponsees. How's that happening? His kids were taken away by the courts. He was never to see his kids again. And now it's his 3rd birthday and his kids are there and they're bringing him his cake. Wow. You want to see God work? Sponsor people. Get them to take the actions that open them up to the grace, and then just sit back for a ringside seat at the greatest show on earth. It's spectacular. My faith and trust in God is reaffirmed in the people I sponsor. I don't think I have it in me to reaffirm it in myself. I have to be in the midst of you. I have to be in the meetings where we're all kidding about so-and-so living in the bush. He's out of detox. He's living in the bushes, but he's coming to meetings. And then 2 years later, you hear the craziest thing. He's buying a house. Wow. How did that happen? How did that happen? The guy that comes to AA who's been, he's never been able to have a relationship. The only thing he has to bring to the table is stocking skills. And now the next thing you know, he's married 3 or 4 years and has a family, and he's like a good guy. How did that happen? Who did that? And guys like me, we start to come to believe. But breaking through the God barrier and obtaining faith is not enough here. Oh my God, I wish it was. Because we just come to believe and we'd be good to go. And it's for those of us who were so God resistant and had so much prejudices against God, and so we were so much anti-religionists because of our childhoods. For guys like me that were like that, when you break through the God barrier and you come to believe it, it's such an amazing event. It feels like you've arrived somewhere. And you haven't. If you've arrived anywhere, you've arrived at the beginning of the road. because faith isn't enough. It's really not. If any of you that ever read William James, people of our type have been having epiphany, coming to believe experiences for thousands of years, and then they drink again. I bet you there's people in this room that have had tremendous faith and then drank again. I sponsored some members of the cloth clergy, very spiritual, religious men with amazing faith, probably more faith than I have. 2 of them drank themselves to death. I remember Frank, he was a wonderful priest. And we're not talking about a deviant priest. He's a good guy. He's just a guy, all he wanted to do was serve God and serve his church. And I was my turn. I guess a lot of people had tried to work with him, and he called me up, and he was back to drinking again. He was sobbing into the phone. He couldn't understand why a man who prayed as much as he prayed and read as much as he read and served God in his church as much as he did, why he could ask God to keep him sober, and he's drinking, and there are bums and drug dealers and prostitutes and thieves in AA staying sober. It didn't seem right to him. And I'll tell you, as he's telling me, it didn't seem right to me either. I thought, my God. If we're all sober through the grace of God, you'd think a guy like that would have a leg up on a bum like me. But Frank's problem wasn't lack of faith. It was lack of power. The book says that that's really the dilemma of alcoholism. It's lack of power. And it's not just the power not to drink. We lack the power to live. Anybody, I'm just curious, anybody besides myself a depressive sometimes? Now can I see the hands of the people who have been able to will themselves out of a depression or think themselves out of one? It's like digging a hole. I just go deeper and deeper and deeper. There's a lot of problems in me that don't budge. I can't willfully maneuver them. I can't think my way. I can't educate myself out of them. So what do? We had to have power. We talk in AA about something that I think people miss. They think that faith is the arrival point. It's not. We talk about conscious contact. We talk about having an experiential relationship with God. There's a difference between faith and conscious contact. If you went tonight when this deal's over and you went and you got in your car and you were to drive home, you'll have all the faith in the world that there are traffic laws and there are police out there to enforce them. Absolute faith. You'll probably curtail your driving habits according to that faith. You get a cop in your rear view mirror with his lights on, you've got conscious contact. And one is in reality experiential and the other is just in the mind. The problem with faith and of the mind is when your emotions are putting the screws to you, you better have had an experience, even if it was intermittent, with the presence of God. Because if you don't have that, you have nothing to turn to. Father Martin said something brilliant one time. He said that when emotion and intellect are in conflict with each other, emotion always wins. The knowledge that God is there and He loves you and He will help you is knowledge. When your emotions putting the screws to you, the emotion is more powerful than the knowledge. The only thing that saves a guy like me is I've had to have had an experience with God that has been experiential and real, so that at those moments when everything in me is screaming for relief, I will take actions that run contrary to what I feel like doing at that moment. And all of us that have survived ourselves for a long period of time, we all have the experience. You ever call your sponsor up because something horrible has happened? Like you're being audited or your wife just ran off with your friend or you're just, the wheels are falling off your life. And you really got problems that need attention and need some answers and some solutions here. And your sponsor says, well, go down to the detox and spend a couple hours talking to some guy down there. It's like he didn't hear you, did he? You want to tell him again. That has nothing. Those guys down there, I need a marriage counselor. I don't need a guy puking. And yet, when I take those actions and I go down there and I walk away from spending a couple hours down there, my problem has gotten so small that it's almost not even a problem anymore. It's still there. But I have something now. I come away with a different perception. I come away realizing that this, in the big scheme of things, that this isn't really that much. I come as if it's an instantaneous priority sort and an induction of reality into my life. Wilson talked about it in his story when he said that there were many times that he'd be in danger of drinking again because he'd be overcome with waves of self-pity, depression, and resentment, and he didn't know what to do. And he said in desperation, he'd go down to Town's hospital and he'd ask Silky if he had some sick guy he could spend some time with. And he'd spend a couple hours with a man down there who can't help him. This guy doesn't have a job for Bill. This guy doesn't have a place to live because he's losing the house on Clinton Street. This guy doesn't have anything except this guy is a vehicle for an experience with God. And Wilson said in his story he'd come away miraculously uplifted and set on his feet. He called it a design for living that works in tough going. In the first line in step 5 in the 12 by 12, it talks about the steps and the actions of Alcoholics Anonymous will run contrary to your natural inclinations and desires. I mean, who among us would think that? My wife left. I think I should go to detox. I mean, this isn't even... Without a sponsor, that wouldn't occur to me. Or I'm having financial difficulties. Pay back some of the people you owe. No, I need money coming in. I don't need it go. And it's funny, you make your financial amends and your financial situation gets better. It defies logic. And yet, it seems to be the way of it. No wonder we talk so much in AA about hitting a bottom. We talk so much about ego deflation. We talk so much about having to be crushed. Because as long as I'm full of myself and I'm the smart guy, I'm not going to do anything that I don't agree with. That's not my idea. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we grow closer to God not by acquisition but by subtraction. We grow closer to God by being smaller. We get bigger spiritually by being smaller egotistically. And it doesn't make sense. We live in a society that perpetrates the idea that knowledge is power. I mean, my God, you can go on the internet and obtain all kinds of knowledge. It doesn't seem to wrest much happiness and satisfaction out of the world for us, though. It doesn't seem to really do too much at all. So we live this way of life, and if I can just lay aside prejudice and start taking the actions, God shows up. But how do we turn this newfound faith into conscious contact? Because if you're like me, I got down on my knees with another member of Alcoholics Anonymous at about a year sober, and I said the 3rd step prayer. And I got to tell you, nothing changed. Nice prayer. I get off my knees and I'm in my head running the universe. I started saying that third step prayer every morning, and it seemed like I started getting sicker and more anxiety and more conflict. I went through job after job. I didn't really do the steps out of the book until I was over 4 years sober. And I'll tell you, my first four years were, if you were to write a dissertation on untreated alcoholism, you could attach my picture to it in those years. It was brutal. I'm suffering from alcoholism, but I'm going to 20 meetings a week. 3 or 4 of them are hospital and institution meetings. I'm a DCM. I'm on 2 convention committees. I'm trying to outrun my alcoholism. But as Chuck Chamberlain said, there comes a time when you can no longer put anything between you and you. And there you are. And there you are. And everything you've been doing, the shines wore off of it, and there you are. And in those first 4 years, I went through 9 jobs. That speaks volumes of untreated alcoholism right there. 9 jobs, 4 years. And it was always their fault. I'd get a good job. Looked like nice people. But it was like I wouldn't be there very long, and it just like, they just become hideous. You know what I mean? They just become stupid after a while, and they just wouldn't listen to the truth from a guy who knows, And so I'm always the guy that's leaving. There's some of those companies I worked with, my God, 35 years later, they're still doing it wrong successfully. Some of those places did better after I left. I'm fighting depression all the time. I was very lucky. I got sober in a tremendous window for recovery in the U.S. From the very late 70s until probably the late 80s, the medical profession had backed off of us. And the reason they did is that they had the great Valium Librium oops of the 70s. This sounds bizarre today. Honest to God, if you find an old PDR from the early 70s, it would say Valium was not addictive in those days. And it was given as a matter of routine course to people with alcoholism. You're newly sober and you're anxious or depressed. You have all those emotions automatically. I was a victim with, as many of us was, I remember sitting in meetings and there'd be people claiming 10 years sober, but they've taken so much Valium, they're drooling in their coffee. Right? And after several thousand of us died, the medical profession just said, well, maybe what Joe Persh, psychiatrist Joe Persh, and maybe what Father Martin and some of these people are saying about don't give them nothing unless they have legitimate mental illness, maybe that's a good idea. And they stopped. When I got sober, the doctors wouldn't give you anything. Believe me, I know, I've asked. They were just like this with, no, you need to just tough it out and be sober. And thank God. Because I suffered from a lot of depression. But depression is a symptom of untreated alcoholism. Silkworth, the first symptoms of untreated alcoholism, which means you need to work the steps. Silkworth mentions it the first time when he says that guys like me who quit drinking, I become restless, irritable, and discontent. Now what does that mean? Well, we all know what that means, restless. That vague feeling of not being able to get settled anywhere. Just like, And irritable. Now, irritable, you're not really irritable, I know, because you don't like irritable people. You're like me. The irritable people irritate people like us. We're not irritable, but we do notice how stupid people are. It's just a gift. Because you're restless, you need to tell them, which makes abstinence a lonely business. And chronically malcontent. And then on page 52, Wilson hits us with more symptoms of untreated alcoholism. And these are This is a pretty good description of me in my first 4 or 5 years of sobriety. The third line in the middle paragraph. Having trouble with personal relationships. That's not just men and women. That's not just sexual relationships. I was having problems with I'm the guy at work that nobody has anything to do with. They walk on eggshells around me. I'm the guy who I don't know how, I made my amends to my mother and father, but I still don't feel comfortable around them, or my sister. The second symptom, couldn't control our emotional natures. Oh my God, I used to go on these emotional roller coaster rides. God. I was a prey to misery and depression. Misery and depression are symptoms of untreated alcoholism. It's not necessarily an SSRI deficiency. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't people who legitimately need stuff like that. But my God, the medical profession today wants to give it to all of us. Right? Had a feeling of uselessness. So, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I don't know where I need to work, but it ain't here. The company that I ended up owning, working my way into and owning and selling about a dozen years ago and retiring and being really kind of put in a nice position financially for the rest of my life. I worked there for a while battling with myself. I knew that this isn't where I needed to be. It was another thing. I was exactly where I needed to be. I could tell you stories about 12-step calls that were made through that work of listening to. One of the things we sold, we were one of the larger. We sold food, but we were also one of the larger wine and liquor distributors in the state of Southern Nevada. I remember taking a guy back into the warehouse and having him sit on 2 cases of Jack Daniels to do his 5th step. Now that's a grapevine photo moment. We were the only liquor store that was on the General Service Office mailing list. And it was exactly where I needed to be. I didn't think so. Alcoholism will never let you be where you are. It's always somewhere else. Chronically malcontent. Had a feeling of uselessness. We're full of fear. So, Silkworth says something in the doctor's opinion that is so insightful into us. Not just drinking, but really through my whole life, drunk and sober, when he says that to us, our alcoholic life seems the normal one. We can't differentiate the true from the false. That means that I'm sober 2-3 years. I wake up every morning anxious, apprehensive, and afraid. And somehow in my mind, I think that that's normal. Right? What that means is that I have this almost pathetic ability to adjust to just about anything. Look at the alcoholics that adjust to being locked up for life in prison. They adjust to it. Look at the alcoholics that end up in abusive relationships and they just stay there year after year as if they adjust. They don't like it, but we have a way of just waking up. I wake up in the morning and I'm afraid. I can't tell you what I'm afraid of, but it's a horrid feeling as if there's going to be some terrible crap going to happen today. I don't know what it is, but I better keep an eye out for it. And so what happens? You walk into your day with that edge on high alert all day long. No wonder I go to an 8:30 meeting at night and somebody says, "Bob, how you doing?" I go, I'm worn out. I've been on edge all day long. And if you ask me, what are you on edge about? I don't know. I had a guy, I didn't know what it was until a guy in AA said something. He said, I walked through life with a feeling of impending doom. I thought, that's what it is. It's a vague, undefined feeling of impending doom. It's fear. It's just because of my position in the universe. You see, my will and my life is not in God's hands. I say the words. I say the prayer. But I can't take the position. I'm blocked. I'm blocked. And that's the whole purpose of step 4 through 9 is to unblock. As a matter of fact, that's what it says going into step 4. It says that even though our decision in step 3 was a vital and crucial step, and it really is, it is the turning point. But it in and of itself could have little permanent effect unless it followed at once by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of what? The things that are making us uncomfortable? No. It says be rid of the things that are blocking us. And I'm blocked. And I remember being in a retreat, and the retreat master used a word, and it just resonated inside me. He said, when you're spiritually disconnected and you have untreated alcoholism, it feels like you're stuck. And I was sober a couple of years, and I thought, my God, it does. I'm stuck. I'm stuck in me. Everybody else seems to be free, and then there's me. I can't seem to get unstuck. Stuck where? In the bondage of self. And I don't know it. And I don't want anybody else to know it. Because when you have no self-esteem and a big ego, you want the bragging rights of the humble and spiritual in AA. Right? So it's an art form to be dying of untreated alcoholism and yet go to meetings and look like a spiritual giant. It's really an art form. And the book talks about guys like me that because of fear that we try to live the double life. You know, I don't misrepresent myself and lie to you and because I'm a liar. I do it because I'm afraid. When you're ego dominant, it's a bad dynamic because I would rather sacrifice my well-being and even my very life in order to look good. And there are alcoholics every day that either die by their own hands or they go back to drinking, and all they had to do was reach out, and they couldn't do it because they would have had to admit to everybody that they weren't doing as well as they'd been putting it out for a number of years. When my friend Frank, with 23 and a half years, committed suicide, it was exactly for that. He'd had a secret life that for some time, and he didn't want anybody to know about it. But I live in Las Vegas, so we get guys all the time that have a secret life of either involving sex or gambling or something, and they burn their life to the ground and go to meetings and put on the stage character, and they can't tell anybody, and they die in the abyss between who they want people to think they are and who they really are. Until one day you realize that they committed suicide or they drank again or crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. And it's so shocking because you could go to meetings with those people. I had a really close friend. Saw a lot for about 5 years. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, all this stuff came. It was like, who is this guy? Right? Some people know. I'm not going to mention any particulars, but the propensity, the alcoholic ego, it doesn't care if it kills you as long as after you're dead, everybody thinks you were amazing. You know, I mean, it doesn't care. All he wants to do is everybody to think you're wonderful and that you were right about everything. That's all it cares about. And so, step 3, I think, really and truly is the decision from this moment on that I want to head my life away from having it in the hands of the idiot. Now, I don't even know that you need to believe in God from that point on. You just have to believe that you can't run your life. And Chamberlain, my grand sponsor Chuck Chamberlain, used to say that God deplores a vacuum. You just have to abandon yourself of you and God shows up. If you're not playing God, God comes in. And that's the whole deal. If you want to get closer to God, my friend Ralph says, shrink you. Shrink you. Tough stuff. So I start on this process in step 3, and I make the decision. But the decision in and of itself is not enough. As all decisions are not enough. They're meaningless. They're just an intention. That's all. I've made the decision that after this weekend, I'm getting on a plane and I'm going back to Las Vegas. I have made that decision. Do you notice that I'm still in Sarasota? There's a lot of stuff that's got to happen before I end up in Las Vegas. And there's a lot of stuff that has to happen from the time I make the decision in step 3 until I start accessing the grace and starting to develop a conscious contact with God. It may have, God, I'll tell you, there's a line, and we agnostics, I tell you, I've read that at different times in my sobriety and times when when it's been hard going, and it's brought tears to my eyes because it's so true and it's so beautiful. It says God does not make hard terms with those who seek Him. That means even the guy who's full of himself and trying to play God, all you got to do is drop it and turn towards Him and He's there. Just like that. Just like that. The problem is I got to drop the universe and turn towards Him. That's the hard part. And so I make this decision and then I have to carry it out. There's a lot of realizations that the book talks about in this section leading up to step 3 that I think are very important. My sponsor thought it was important because he had me read page 60 through 63 over and over and over and over again. And there's some stuff in here, it talks about the actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the scenery, I've never done that personally. But I can see clearly how there's a lot of people in my home group that does that. And I was on several committees. Oh my God, there's a whole bunch in the committees. You really want to see people trying to run the whole show? Go to a business meeting of your home group. Oh my God, they're all there. Isn't it funny that I could see it in you? I could see it in the people I worked with. I could see it in my boss. I could see it in my mother. But I couldn't see it in myself. And in the 12 steps and 12 traditions, and I believe it's in step 4, it says that we'll be quick to see our defects of character in others before we could ever see them in ourselves. See, I could see that you're selfish and self-centered. I could see that you're trying to run the show, but I don't see it in me. And oddly enough, I could be doing almost identical actions and I'm not running the show. You are. But I'm just trying to make things nice. That's all. This is the right way. You're doing it. This is the right. I'm not trying to run the show. I'm trying to make things good for everybody. I have a tendency to turn self-will into a global endeavor. Do you know what I mean? It's not just about me. This is for the good of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is good for everybody. Right? You ever tell yourself that? Like when you're about to tell someone off at your home group, you fancy that they're going to build a statue of you at GSO because this is benefiting all of AA, and it's really just a selfish little vindictive manipulation from a guy who's trying to run the universe. That's all. So I started to read this and I couldn't see that it was me. There's something that happens, earlier in chapter 4, it talks about how some of us eventually face God and come to God. And it uses a word that really has meant a lot to me. It talks about when we're crushed. And it says when we're crushed by self-imposed, which means we don't know we did it, but we did it. We didn't intend to make the wheels come off, but we're crushed by self-imposed crises we could not postpone or evade. Then we would fearlessly face the proposition that God is either everything or He's nothing. He either is or He isn't. And I came to this like that. I'd been reading page 60 through 63 probably at least once or twice a week for some time. And I'm not getting anything out of it. And I went to work one day, and it was one of those days that guys like me in early sobriety used to have a lot. You just wake up with that edge. You know what I mean? Just that edge, like the noticer is on full blast, just noticing stuff about. And I go to work and I'm noticing, and a whole bunch, couple pallets of stock came in, and I'm working in a retail store, and I'm working with two other guys, and they're not doing nothing, and I'm back in the back, busting my butt, taking this stuff apart, for figuring out the prices, pricing it, redoing the shelves to make room for it, putting all this stuff away. And these two idiots that I work with aren't doing nothing. They're up at the cash register drinking coffee and telling jokes, talking to customers. And some of the customers walk right by them, and in the middle of my extreme efforts here are bugging me and asking for help, which is very selfish of them, I believe. I don't say nothing. I just getting more and more uptight. Boss comes in, doesn't even come back and say, "Attaboy." He just stands up there and has a cup of coffee with the two idiots, laughing and telling stories. Doesn't even notice all the work I'm doing. By the time at the end of the day, I'm just fed up with those people. And I don't say nothing. It's like as Clancy says, it's like we get a spring in the pit of our stomach and life just starts tightening it. It's tightening. I'm just tightening it. And I'm a secretary of a rush hour group. and I got to go get there early because I'm meeting a new guy there, so I'm kind of on a mission from God, I suppose. And I got to stop at the grocery store and get some styrofoam cups because we're out of styrofoam cups. So I'm in a hurry because I don't want the new guy to beat me there. So I get to the grocery store and I get the styrofoam cups and I get in the 12 item or less line behind a woman with 15 items. I've counted them twice. Matter of fact, I'm embarrassed to tell you the second time I counted them, I went like this. I wanted to throttle her. Here's what I really wanted to do. If I would have had more time and I wouldn't have been in a hurry, I would have gone back to the office, would have grabbed that manager, I would have made him come up there and count those 15 items underneath the 12 items or less. But that just slowed me down, so I just tightened the spring up a little bit more to get out of there. Now I'm in a hurry, because now I'm sure the new guy's going to beat me to the meeting. So I get in Maryland Parkways, three lanes going one way, 3 lanes coming the other, just a yellow line between the 6 lanes. And I get in supposedly the passing lane behind a woman going 5 miles an hour below the speed limit. And I feel like my head's, and I'm right on her bumper, just driving me crazy. She doesn't even notice I'm there. Just driving along. Crazy. At one point I thought to myself, I'm gonna floor it. I'm gonna ram into her. I'm gonna push us both into oncoming traffic. We'll probably be killed, but she'd see. Didn't do that. I just tightened the spring up a little bit more. Get to that meet. Finally got around her like a crazy person. Gave her the 1-finger salute, head down the road. Got there, and my new guy's already there. And he's sitting in the back of the room. I said, "You get up there, sit up here." Got him sitting right in the front, laying the literature out. Oh man, I can lay some literature out. Impressive. I'm waiting for the perfect chairman and co-chairman to start this meeting because I want this new guy to get the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I waited patiently. I got the right 2 guys that were sober a while, and I knew they had a good message and they were good members of AA. Got them chair and co-chair. I said to one guy, I said, "Listen, got a new guy here, so let's not read chapter 5. Let's read chapter 3 for the new guy." And AA people are pretty pliable. They say, yeah, sure, whatever. They start the meeting and I read chapter 3 and I'm looking at the new guy, seeing if he's hearing it. Picturing him getting his year, mentioning my name. The chairman says, does anybody have anything they want to share? Some guy, I don't know who he is, raises his hand, starts talking about shooting heroin. Well, some old timer doesn't know nothing about that, interrupts him and says, hey, this is Alcoholics Anonymous, you can't talk about that here. Some other guy jumps in and says, hey, this is AA, he can talk about whatever he wants to talk about here. And it's the meeting from hell. And the whole visual of the guy getting the year mentioning my name is like dissipating like smoke in the wind. It's just, and it's terrible. This is a horrible meeting. And by the end of the meeting, I'm done, man. I want to quit AA. I'm the only one here that knows the truth. I'm ready to quit AA. I get that literature, I throw it in the bag, and I go home. And like Pavlov's dog, I've been conditioned to call my sponsor. And I called up Dick, and I started telling about my day. And he says, read page 60 through 63. And I get to the bottom of page 60, and here's what it says. It says, I'm like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, the people in the store, the people in traffic, the people sharing in the AA meeting in my own way. If only my arrangements would stay put, if only people would do as I wished, this show would be great. Everybody, including myself, would be pleased and life would be wonderful. And for the first time in my life, it was me. And I'll tell you something, the amazing thing about that, it wasn't as if I just became that guy. I'd been that guy all my life. And I couldn't see it until that moment. How could you be that guy living and reaping the rewards of the conflict and all the crap I read all my life and never see it? But I couldn't see it until I could see it. Chamberlain used to say, you can't see what you can't see until you can see it. And that day, it was like a veil lifted and all of a sudden AA started to make sense. All of a sudden now I started to see myself in page 60 and through 63. And now I started at a gut level to understand why I needed a new manager. Why I needed to get my life out of the hands of the idiot. The book says we're producers of confusion rather than harmony. Some of us can never see that. I've met people that are sober, double-digit sobriety, that are miserable, and they can't see themselves in this part of the book. And if you can't see yourself in this part of the book, the rest of the steps are nothing but an academic exercise. If you don't know in the pit of your stomach that you are hell-bent to destroy yourself running your own life, then there's no need for a new manager. It's 1:15, but God's got a different clock. I'll say one little quick thing and then we'll end because I'm getting a signal from the universe that we should. Tomorrow we're going to start an amazing process. The process of dismantling the ego. I think that's what step 4 is about. It's dismantling the judgment machine and to seeing at a great depth the thing I don't want to see. And that's how I'm wrong. If you're new and you can't stand being wrong, he told me that would only make that noise when someone was thinking about themselves too deeply. So we're going to start that tomorrow. Thanks all for listening and hanging in there.
We're going to draw that 50-50, so everybody stay put. Thanks. Let's give Bob a big hand. Thank you for clapping. Good job.